ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله وصلى الله تبارك وتعالى عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وبارك وسلم تسليما كثيرا كثيرا أما بعد. A couple of weeks ago we were looking at names and what kind of names should you keep for your child, what kind of names are impermissible for your child, non-Muslim names, nicknames, and so on and so forth. Now there was a question which was posed by one of the brothers regarding names, so I'll just clarify in the dars today, is that sometimes you have a brother whose name is Tariq, or you have a brother whose name is Jamil or Jamal. And what people will tend to do is that the initial of that brother's name, they will start calling him with the initial. So for example, if his name is Tariq, they will start calling him T, and so on. Or the brother's name is Jamal or Jamil, they won't call him Jamal or Jamil, they will start calling him J, and so on. Now the question was, the brother who asked me was, whether that is permissible or not. Now the masla or the ruling is that Imam Bukhari rahmatullah alayh in his Al-Adab al-Mufrad has cited a couple of hadiths in which Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam shortened the name of Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu and shortened the name of Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha. I quoted this hadith before, that when Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was calling towards Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu, he once called him Usmu, that Usm, come here. And in another narration, in another tradition, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam was calling upon Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha, he called her Ya Ash. Instead of Ya Aisha, he called her Ya Ash. The same ruling will also apply for this particular question as well. That a person, his name is Tariq, so you can call him T. It will be permissible to call him T. However, it should not be a habit. Meaning that this brother's name is Tariq, so you should call him Tariq all the time. Here and there, just say for example, you called him T, then there's nothing wrong with it. It will be mubah and it will be permissible. But to, for example, calling him T, to such an extent that people have forgotten his name, what was his real name, everybody calls him T, or everybody's like forgotten his real name and everybody's calling him J, then that would not be allowed. Because the hadiths in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam shortened the name of Hazrat Uthman radiallahu anhu and shortened the name of Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha, it was only sometimes. As the Shurrah, the commentators of hadith have written, Kabi Kabar, meaning that sometimes Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did that, not all the time. So from this we can understand that you can call a brother T, however it should not be made into a habit. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the tawfiq to act upon what has been said. Wa akhiru da'wan alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Now, going to the next part of our topic, and that was regarding the word Allah. In the sentence, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, we were looking at Allah and some beliefs which we should have as Muslims regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like for example, like one belief which we should have regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He is one, and that everything in this world came into existence through Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's doing. Another belief which we should have regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He is independent. He is not in need of anyone. There is no partners. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have a wife, doesn't have a son to help Him, and so on. The third belief which we have regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is free from limbs, and obviously this issue was discussed in quite detail last week. When we say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't have a limb, doesn't have a face, then how come it is mentioned in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a face, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has a hand, and so on. So obviously I mentioned, quoted some sayings of Imam Malik rahmatullah alayh and the hadith from Sahih al-Bukhari and so on. Now the fourth belief which we should have regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is omnipresent. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is everywhere. And the fifth belief which we should have regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has knowledge of everything. The sins which you have committed discreetly in your rooms when no one was there, or the sin which you committed with your eyes, looking at unlawful women, or the sin which you committed through your heart, the desire which you have made for doing something bad, no one will know but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. Even that small insect which crawls beneath big massive bushes, we don't know, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has knowledge of everything. He has knowledge of the unseen. He knows what is going to happen tomorrow. Now with regards to belief number 4 and 5, we need to discuss two issues here. The first issue is that whether someone besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, like a saint and so on, could they be omnipresent? And number 2, whether someone besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or a saint or a awliya, could they have knowledge of the unseen? That could they know what is going to happen tomorrow? Do they possess knowledge what's going to happen the week after, next month, and so on? Now, before we dwell into that particular issues, first and foremost, I need to explain regarding Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As I began last week, that having love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is an important part of Iman, is an important part of faith. There is a hadith in Sahih al-Bukhari narrated by Sayyidina Anas bin Malik radhiyallahu anhu, and similar wordings of this particular hadith can be found in Sahih al-Muslim, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had said that none amongst you can be a perfect believer until I do not become more beloved to him than his father, than his children, and all the people. Meaning that when a person, when he loved Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam more than his parents, more than his children, more than his wives, more than his brothers, more than his sisters, and so on, when a person does that, then that is a sign that this person has true belief and true Iman in his heart. And if a person, for example, he loves his wife, say, more than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he loves his parents more than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, obviously we still call him a mu'min, we still call him a believer, but we will say that this person doesn't have true Iman, doesn't have the perfect Iman, doesn't have the complete faith on Islam and on the Deen. Furthermore, there is a hadith narrated by Sayyidina Ibn Abbas anhu, which can be found in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, where once there were a group of Sahabas, there were a group of companions, and they were talking amongst themselves. When one of the Sahabi said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has appointed or has made Ibrahim alayhi salam as his Khalil. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Ibrahim alayhi salam as Khalilullah, as the friend of Allah. And another Sahabi, he stood up and he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Musa alayhi salam as Kalimullah. Kalimullah means the one who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Hazrat Isa alayhi salam Ruhullah, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the Prophet Adam alayhi salam Safiyullah, i.e. the chosen one. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam overheard this conversation, and he went to the Sahabas, and he said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Ibrahim alayhi salam Khalilullah as his friend, yet he is worthy of that, meaning that he is worthy of that rank. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Musa alayhi salam Kalimullah, but he is worthy of that rank. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Hazrat Isa alayhi salam Ruhullah, but he is worthy of that rank. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made Hazrat Adam alayhi salam Safiyullah, but he is worthy of that rank. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, Allah, listen, Ana Habibullah, I am Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's beloved. That I am the most beloved in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why my laqab or my title is Habibullah. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam goes on to mention his virtues, and Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says that on the day of judgment, Hazrat Adam alayhi salam will be beneath me. Hazrat Adam alayhi salam will be behind me. And wala faqra, and I do not say so that I can boast. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes on to say that on the day of judgment, the first person who will be allowed to intercede will be me, i.e. will be Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the first person's intercession which will be accepted will be Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wala faqra, and I do not say it so that I can boast. Then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes on to say that on the day of judgment, I will be the first one who will open the gates of Jannah, who will open the gates of paradise. Wala faqra, I do not say it so that I can boast. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes on to say that out of all the people who have come and who are going to come, I am the most honored, wala faqra, and I do not say to boast. From this particular hadith, we can deduce and establish Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's virtue. That he is the most beloved in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He is the most virtuous person ever to step foot in this earth is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is like a unanimous belief of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah that many prophets have been sent. However, the best and the most virtuous prophet is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam without any doubt. So from this we can understand that we should have love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we should also praise Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That we should, whatever possible, read as much Durood Sharif as much as possible. However, we should not exaggerate our praise or our belief for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this can be deduced from a hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari, where it's narrated by Sayyidina Umar bin Khattab radhiyallahu anhu, that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that do not praise me or do not exaggerate in praising me like the Christians praise the son of Mary, like the Christians praise Isa bin Maryam. I am, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saying, that I am a slave of Allah, so therefore call me Abdullahi wa Rasuluh, call me Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's slave and his Rasul and his messenger. Hafiz bin Hajar rahmatullah alayh, upon commentating on this particular hadith in his thesis Fathul Bari, has said that the meaning of this hadith is that do not praise Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to such an extent that you treat him like God or you treat him like the Son of God. You can praise him, you can do Durood Sharif, you can, sing poems, nasheed for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's nothing wrong with it. Have many conferences, have many seerah conferences where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is praised and so on. There's nothing wrong with that. However, the praise should be done within the boundary of Islam. The praise, the love for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam should be done within the boundary of Islam. It comes in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "La taghlu fi dinikum," that do not be extreme or do not be extremist in your deen or in your religion. Even though this particular verse was revealed with regards to the Jews because they were very extreme in their belief, but it can be used generally for the Muslim as well. That in your deen or in your religion, there is no extremism. Do not be extreme and so on. So we should love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We should respect Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We should honor Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Even to the extent there's many verses in the Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tarfa'u aswatakum fawqa sawtin nabi." That all believers, do not speak louder or do not raise your voice above the voice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Other verses, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tuqaddimu bayna yadayi Allahi wa rasulihi. That do not go ahead or do not move forward than Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Meaning Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam walking, that you do not walk ahead of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Many verses from the Holy Quran, many hadith, many traditions, which shows that we should love Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, have respect for Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. However, our respect and love and honor should be done within the boundaries of Islam, and it shouldn't exceed the boundaries of Islam. Now, keeping all this in mind, it is the belief of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not omnipresent. That only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is omnipresent. That only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be everywhere. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam or even any saints or any awliya, they cannot be everywhere. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can be omnipresent and no one else. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the best of creation. However, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's human characteristics should not be denied. Many places in the Holy Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala very clearly described Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a bashar. Like the verse in Surah Al-Kahf where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Qul innama ana basharum mithlukum yuha ilayya." The O Nabi, say to the people that innama ana basharum mithlukum, that I am a bashar, I am a human like you and I. Yuha ilayya, and that the wahi and the divine revelation is given to me. That's the only difference. But with regards to the other humans and so on, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is like you and I. the verse in Surah Al-Zumar where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّكَ مَيِّتُ وَإِنَّهُمْ مَيِّتُونَ. That this verse was revealed when the pagans of Mecca, they were thinking, they were talking amongst themselves, and they said that look, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he has introduced this new faith, he has introduced this new deen, and he has taken all our believers and they've all become Muslims and so on. So they said that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passes away, then obviously his new deen and his newfound religion will also die out and will also pass away. So this verse was revealed saying, Innaka mayyitu, like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is like a human. The same way humans, you and I will pass away one day, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam will also pass away. Wa innahum mayyitun, and similarly the pagans of Makkah, the disbelievers of Makkah will also pass away as well. Other hadith is like from Sahih al-Bukhari, where once Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he read 3 rakat. Instead of reading 4 rakat salah, he read 3 rakat. And after he finished his salah, the companions, they corrected Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam the mistake. And then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that I am not but a human like you. I am not but a human like you, and I forget things like you. Clearly indicating that he is a human, he is a bashar. That I am a human like you, and I also forget like you. Meaning the same way humans, asla, we always forget things. So similarly Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would sometimes forget as well. Like instead of reading the 4 rakats of the salah, he once by mistake, he read 3 rakats. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is clearly saying that I am not but a human like you, and I forget things like you and like you. So if I forget something, remind me. So if I forget something, remind me. These are the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Now the correct belief which we should have regarding Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam with regard to this issue is that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not omnipresent. He is not Hazir or Nazir. But what we say is that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, or if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, He may take Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's soul to a particular place. Okay? It's not correct for us to say that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is here, or Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is in a particular road, or he's in a particular city, or he's in a particular house. It's not correct for us to say that. However, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants or wills, then He can take Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's soul from his grave and He can put it somewhere else. But obviously we don't know. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. So that is like the most correct belief which is given by the majority of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that mutlaqan, meaning that generally Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is not omnipresent. However, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants, He may take Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's soul to a particular place, to a particular city, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's soul can be there. However, it is incorrect for us to say or pinpoint that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's soul is here, so therefore we need to stand up and do Durood Sharif and so on. It's not correct for us to say that. And the reason the scholars come to this particular point or viewpoint is that it is the belief that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is still alive in his grave. Even though Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has passed away, he's had a worldly death, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is alive in his grave. Mullah Liqari rahmatullah alayhi in his Mirqat, and similarly Imam Subki and Imam Shawkani in his Nail al-Awtar has mentioned that all the prophets are alive in their grave. That they read salah in their grave, they read namaz in their grave, and they eat and drink in their grave as well. Very famous hadith of Sunan ibn Majah, narrated by Sayyidina Abu Darda radhiyallahu anhu, that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has said that on Thursday night, Jumurat ke din, recite Durood Sharif upon me. Like recite Durood abundantly upon me. Why? Because the angels present the Durood to me. Like the angels, the Malaika, they will present the Durood upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Sayyidina Abu Darda radhiyallahu anhu, the narrator of the hadith, he says that would you even hear this? That when we read Durood, would you even hear the Durood Sharif being read? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam replied that yes, I will hear the Durood Sharif. Why? Because it is haram for the earth to eat my body. That the earth cannot eat the body of a prophet of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Same way when we pass away and so on, after many years, the earth will eat our body. We will turn into dust. Our bones will turn into dust as well. But Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's body, blessed body, and even all the prophets, not just specifically Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, all the prophets, the earth, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made it haram for the earth to eat and consume their body. All the prophets are alive, and Rasulullah, and the hadith finishes off by saying that thus all the prophets are alive and they are given sustenance. The unko rizq diya jara, meaning that they are all given sustenance and they are all alive in the grave. So therefore, the conclusion of this particular issue, whether Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam can be omnipresent or not, the ruling is that no, he cannot be omnipresent. However, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills, he can take Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's soul to another place. Why? Because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is alive in his grave. Now moving on to belief number 5 with regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that is that we should believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has knowledge of everything, that he has knowledge of the unseen, that what's going to happen tomorrow, ماذا تكسب غدا, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala only knows. A pregnant woman, whether she's going to give birth to a boy or girl, whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has written in destiny, has written before the creation of this earth, that this is going to happen. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has knowledge of everything. We have knowledge of what is in front of us. Like I could see you guys, I could see someone talking, or I could see someone moving around, I could see that. But what's going to happen, what's happening in the other class, I can't see. What's happening in the other building, I can't see. What's happening in another city, I don't know, I can't see. So only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has knowledge of everything. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has full knowledge of everything. He has knowledge of the unseen. Which takes me on to the next point, that whether someone besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, like Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or a saint or a awliya, could they have or could they possess knowledge of the unseen? Now the answer is that no, that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala possesses knowledge of the unseen, and no one besides Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can have knowledge of the unseen. And again, like the previous issue, this is also very clear as well. Many places in the Holy Quran, like in Surah Al-An'am, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to tell Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that وَلَا أَعْلَمُ الْغَيْبَ وَلَا أَقُولُ لَكُمْ إِنِّي مَلَكٌ, that وَلَا أَعْلَمُ الْغَيْبَ, that you tell the people that I do not have any knowledge of the unseen. Al-Ghaib here means unseen. And وَلَا أَقُولُ لَكُمْ إِنِّي مَلَكٌ, and you tell the people, and وَلَا أَقُولُ لَكُمْ إِنِّي مَلَكٌ, I am not telling you that I am a malak, I am an angel. In attabi'u illa ma yuha ilay, I only follow that wahi or that divine revelation which has been given to me. This is a verse of Surah Al-An'am, verse number 50. And another verse which is more clear is the verse of Surah Al-A'raf, which is verse 188, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to tell the people, قُلْ لَا أَمْلِكُ لِنَفْسِي نَفْعًا وَلَا ضَرًّا, that Kul, say to the people, La amliku li nafsi naf'an wa la darran, that I do not have any power. La amliku means I do not have any power for to benefit myself, li nafsi naf'an, or to remove any harm from myself. Now, Qul la amliku li nafsi naf'an wa la darran illa ma sha Allah, unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. And then this is the main verse, main part. وَلَوْ كُنْتُ أَعْلَمُ الْغَيْبَ لَاسْتَكْثَرْتُ مِنَ الْخَيْرِ, that if I had knowledge of the unseen, أَعْلَمُ الْغَيْبِ, that if I had knowledge of the unseen, لَاسْتَكْثَرْتُ مِنَ الْخَيْرِ, I would have accumulated a lot of benefit and lot of khair and lot of good for myself. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling the people that look, I cannot, obviously if a person had knowledge of the unseen, then obviously naturally any harm which was going to befall him, any calamity which is going to befall him, he would refrain from that particular thing. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is saying that look, I don't have any power to either benefit myself or to remove any harm from myself, or unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wills. And walau kuntu a'lamul ghaib, and if I, law in Arabic is in the meaning of something which doesn't happen, like it's just like a wish. Law a'lamul ghaiba. So لو كنت أعلم الغيب, and if I had knowledge of the unseen, then لاستكثرت من الخير, I would have accumulated a lot of benefit for myself. But because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam doesn't have knowledge of the unseen, so therefore I'll mention some examples. A lot of harm did fall upon Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam from the disbelievers, from the kuffar, which like other human beings Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had to pass by. Now there are so many incidents through hadith and through the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which very clearly shows that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not have knowledge of the unseen. The very famous example will be of the incident known as Ifk. Now this incident can be found in the Quran in Surah An-Nur. When the Muslims were victorious in the battle of Banu Mustalaq, which is also known as the Battle of Muraysiyah, which happened in 6th Hijri. The Muslims, they were returning back from this journey. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was there, the companions were there. And in that particular battle, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam took his wife, Hazrat Aisha radhiyallahu anha. So they were all returning back from this battle. And they stopped over at a place. Now what happened was, during the night, in the middle of the night, an announcement was made that everybody should collect their belongings, should tidy up, should collect everything. Why? Because we will be proceeding to Medina Munawwara. So Hazrat Aisha anha, who was in something called the Hawdaj, because at that time what happened was the verse of hijab was revealed, and obviously women weren't allowed to expose their face and their selves in front of men. So Hazrat Aisha anha was in this Hawdaj, which is like a small tent. So she got out of her tent and she went to the toilet and so on. When she was coming back, the necklace she was wearing ripped and the beads came out of the necklace. So Hazrat Aisha anha was looking for the beads, she was locating for the beads, she was looking for the beads and so on. And by the time she found the beads and put it back into the necklace, she goes back to the original place and she sees everyone has gone. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahabas, the caravan, the Hawdaj, everything, the tent, everything's gone. So Hazrat Aisha anha says to herself that obviously Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam will realize in the journey that I'm not in my tent, and then he will send someone after me to collect me. So she says that I will just stay here. So she stays here and then she falls asleep. Now it was a practice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that whenever there used to be a traveling group who used to travel together, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would always appoint someone at the back of the traveling group, so that if anyone was left behind or if someone left something behind, then this Sahabi or this person will collect that person and then will bring them back to Medina Munawwara. In that particular journey, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam appointed Hazrat Safwan bin Mu'attal radiyallahu anhu. And Hazrat Safwan bin Mu'attal radiyallahu anhu was at the back of the caravan, was at the back of the group, and he approaches that place where Hazrat Aisha anha is sleeping. And because he saw Hazrat Aisha anha before the verses of hijab were revealed, and he realized that this was Hazrat Aisha anha, he says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. As soon as he says that, Hazrat Aisha anha wakes up. And it comes in the hadith that Hazrat Safwan bin Mu'attal anhu didn't look at Hazrat Aisha anha. He didn't speak to Hazrat Aisha anha, nor did Hazrat Aisha anha spoke or looked at Hazrat Safwan bin Mu'attal anhu. What does Hazrat Safwan bin Mu'attal anhu do? He lowers his mount, he lowers his camel, he gestures Hazrat Aisha anha to climb the camel, and then he takes Hazrat Aisha anha back to Medina Munawwara. When they were approaching Medina Munawwara, the munafiqeen, the hypocrites, they spread a wicked, a vicious rumor. They say, Nauzu billah, thumma nauzu billah, that Hazrat Aisha anha cheated on Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As they said that Hazrat Aisha anha did zina with Hazrat Safwan bin Mu'attal radhiyallahu anhu. The munafiqeen, they spread this rumor. Even to the extent that even some believers, even some mu'min, in the name of Hazrat Mistah radhiyallahu anhu, Hazrat Hassan radhiyallahu anhu, Hazrat Hamna radhiyallahu anha, they also get caught up in this rumor and they start spreading this rumor as well. For 1 month, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in suspense. He didn't know what was happening. people were talking ill about his beloved wife Hazrat Aisha anha, the wahi hadn't come for 1 month. So the question, or from this we can understand that if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had knowledge of the unseen, if he had ilm ghaib, he would have known straight away when these rumors were being spread, he would have known straight away that Hazrat Aisha anha couldn't have done such a thing. That Hazrat Aisha anha didn't do zina with Hazrat Safwan bin Mu'attal anhu, then and everything would have been sorted. But because it wasn't, and for 1 month Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was a lot of harm felt on Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because he didn't know whether it was true or not, whether this rumor was true or not. For 1 month no wahi, no divine revelation came, and then after that 2 verses of Surah Nur were revealed, which showed that Hazrat Aisha anha didn't actually commit any zina or did anything bad like that, and it was in fact the munafiqeen, the hypocrites, they spread this rumor, they made a slander regarding Hazrat Aisha anha, and the order was passed that these munafiqeen, these hypocrites and the Muslims who participated in spreading this rumor, they should be whipped 80 times. Look at the story of the way Surah Al-Hashr was revealed. When Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam migrated to Medina Munawwara, the first thing he did was he did a pact with the Jews, and he said to the Jews that we will not fight against you, you will not fight against us. We will not aid someone in fighting against you, and you, i.e. the Jews, you will not aid someone in fighting against us. And the main part of the treaty was that if one of us, whether the Muslims or Jews, if we killed someone accidentally, then both of us will share the blood money. Meaning the blood money, we will give half, i.e. the Muslims will give half, and the Jews will give half. Now there was a Sahabi, there was a companion, and his name just slips on my head. But anyway, the companion, the Sahabi, he killed someone accidentally from a tribe called Banu Amir. And as according to the treaty, what the ruling was that it has to be half blood money will be given by the Muslims and half by the Jews. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam collects the blood money from the Muslims, and he goes to the Jews to collect their 50% of the blood money. Now what the Jews do is that they say to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you stand near that wall. You stand near that wall, and we will come to give you the blood money. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam goes there, he stands near the wall. And the plan which the Jews had made was that a Jew will climb the other side of the wall, and he will chuck a rock at Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam's head so that they can kill and martyr Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went there, and when the Jew was about to do that, Hazrat Jibreel alayhi salam quickly came with the wahi, with the divine revelation, warning Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam of the plans of the Jews, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam escaped that, and he went back to Medina Munawwara, and he told the Jews that because you have broken the treaty, the punishment is that you have to be expelled from Medina Munawwara. Now again, look at that story. If Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had ilm ghaib, if he had knowledge of the unseen, would he have gone near that particular wall? Obviously we will have to die one day, but just say for example, if we knew that we were going to die tomorrow and this is how we were going to die, would we kind of go to that place? We won't go to that place, even though our belief is that whenever we're going to die, it's been written and we will die in that particular place. But just say if we knew, we will try our best to save ourselves from the cause of our death. So exactly same thing here as well. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, if he had knowledge of the unseen, and if he knew that the Jews were planning that particular thing, then Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam wouldn't have gone there. Another example, look at the way Surah Talaq was revealed. When the practice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was that after Asr of every day, he would visit his wives. He had 9 wives. After Asr every day, he would go and visit each one of these wives, and he will ask about them, how are you doing, and so on. Now there was one of the wives, Hazrat Zainab radiallahu anha. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to spend a lot of time with her. And the reason why was because Hazrat Zainab radiallahu anha used to give Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam honey. She used to give Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam this honey. Now the other wives, like Hazrat Hazrat Hafsa radiallahu anha and Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha, they found out that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is spending a lot of time with Hazrat Zainab radiallahu anha. So what they do is that they make a plan and they say that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes to our house, we will say that akalt al-maghafir, that you ate maghafir. Now maghafir is like a herb which has a foul smell. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam didn't like anything which got a foul smell. That's why he said in the hadith of Sahih al-Bukhari that if anyone has ate onions, then do not come to the mosque unless like you clean your mouth out and so on. So obviously maghafir is a herb which had a very foul smell, very bad smell. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he goes to Hazrat Hafsa radiallahu anha's house, he goes to Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha's house, and they say that, oh, you ate maghafir. So what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam does, he says, the honey which I ate in Hazrat Zainab radiallahu anha's house, I'm going to make this haram upon me. And then the verse was revealed, Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu lima tuharrimu ma ahallallahu lak. That, oh Nabi, oh Prophet, why are you making something haram which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made you halal? Now later on in that chapter, in the surah, it says that it was in fact a plan which was made by Hazrat Hafsa and Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha. Now again the question arises that if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew, if he had knowledge of the unseen, if he knew of this plan between Hazrat Hafsa and Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha, that they just made this plan so that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam stops eating the honey from Hazrat Zainab radiallahu anha's house, then if Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew of that, then why did he make honey haram upon him? And there are countless of examples which we can find through hadith which clearly say that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not possess knowledge of the unseen, but he was a human like you and I. And the most clearest hadith is the hadith which we can find in Sahih al-Bukhari, where it's narrated by Hazrat Aisha anha. That once Masruq is a tabi, he's a predecessor. He asked Hazrat Aisha anha that did the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on Mi'raj. That when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam went to the seven heavens, did Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Now obviously there's difference of opinion. Some scholars say that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. However, the view of Hazrat Aisha anha was that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when Masruq asked this question to Hazrat Aisha anha, Hazrat Aisha anha says that what you said makes my hair stand. That what you have said, it makes my hair stand. And this is what she says. And she says that if someone tells you one of the following three things, then they are a liar. What's the first thing? If someone says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam saw Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they are a liar. Number two, if someone says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew what was going to happen tomorrow, they are a liar. And number three, if someone says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam concealed some of the laws and some of the rulings and ahkam which were sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they are a liar. And another hadith, similar wording in Sahih al-Muslim, where Hazrat Aisha anha, again the narrator of the hadith, says that whoever says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam knew what was going to happen the following day, what was going to happen tomorrow, then he is a big liar. So quite clearly we can deduce and we can understand that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not possess knowledge of the unseen, and nor was Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was omnipresent. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to act upon what has been said. Wa akhiru da'wan alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Inshallah we'll leave it at this particular point because it's a new section. After that, inshallah we'll start next week. Inshallah we'll do a small dua after questions. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. اللهم آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار اللهم فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وكفر عنا سيئاتنا وتوفنا مع الأبرار اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا وعملا متقبلا ورزقا طيبا وشفاء من كل داء ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلقه محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.